Thank you very much for joining this session on sustainability and SMEs. As you can see, we have guests from 3 sustainability solutions providers who will introduce you to their software tools that will help SMEs transition to a sustainable business model, and of course to report on sustainability matters. But first, I will start on a brief update on how EFRAG's VSME, which we believe is going to be a key development, key driver in SME sustainability reporting, is progressing, and my initial views on what I think it means for SME accountants. Presentations will be made available. It's quite a packed session, but we hope to have questions in at the end. And I think you have access to the chat if you want to ask the questions in advance. If we overrun a bit, it's possible for us to keep this session open to take remaining questions. So without further ado. So the VSME progress report, primarily that's what we're concentrating on today and not on the LSME so much. The expected delivery to the Commission is still the 10th of December. In fact, it may even have been the case that the draft of VSME was approved already this morning, because there's a meeting of EFRAG's SRB this morning to approve the current drafts, but I haven't been able to check on that yet. But I think we are in the end game for what the VSME is going to look like now. And it still is modular-based approach, and still 3 modules, but more on that later. One interesting change from the initial drafts is materiality has been dropped completely now. For all 3 modules, it's a report if the matter is applicable to the SME in question. So this is a simplification matter definitely that will help SMEs adopt this, I think. Unlike the LSME, consolidated reporting is encouraged, and if a group sustainability report is prepared, there is then no need to prepare individual sustainability statements for the subsidiaries. Another interesting development, EFRAG have kind of realised that SMEs might not be willing to present this information publicly under all circumstances. So they emphasize that the VSME's primary function is to inform business partners, and that disclosure publicly is an optional extra in effect, which I think again is a useful sort of change of emphasis on this. As you might expect, the VSME reports are to be prepared annually, but only if required annually. So here, basically, they're also admitting the fact that this is primarily for business partners of SMEs. And basically, if the business partners don't require this to be prepared annually, then the SME doesn't have to, but then should just update the data when it changes, or update the metrics when they change. But of course, if the SME wishes to prepare this annually, they're of course allowed to do so, because it's all voluntary anyway. There's also the option to report separately or in the management report, and here specific mention is made of whatever legislation exists in member states, whether this is prescribed or not, but there is the option to go either way. And in respect of interlinkage with the financial statements, all that's required is the information is to be coherent with the financial statements. No kind of direct requirement that it should be the same, but basically as long as it doesn't contradict information in the financial statements. Moving on to the basic module, you'll be pleased to hear I don't intend to go through these in detail, but what we have here are 11 basic building blocks of the VSME standard. These are mandatory in a voluntary standard for all SMEs, including micro entities, but of course only if the matters are applicable to the SME. They cover basic disclosure on important areas, as you can see, such as climate, water pollution, water use, and own workforce. I think it's important to mention that metrics B1 and B2 are the effective replacement for not only B1 in the original drafts, but the entire narratives and policies and targets module, which previously consisted of 5 metrics and was in the original draft of the standard. These disclosures now are much more streamlined and, except in a few strange inclusions, are, in my opinion, now far more relevant to SMEs and far more achievable for most SMEs as well. I'd also highlight the 3 workforce disclosures. These have strong links to financial reporting, obviously, and I can see this as an area for accountants to become involved, but I will also imagine that HR systems, payroll systems, will increasingly appear with VSME compatible disclosures included, as they say, in the box. I'm also hoping that not too many accountants will be asked by their clients for assistance on B11 convictions and fines re corruption and bribery. The second of the modules is the comprehensive module, and this is specifically directed at business partners. And it's a cut down version of the original business partner module and to provide key information to value chain partners. Although it's still, in my opinion, a bit too heavily bank and finance focused, I believe this module is now far more appropriate for SMEs. In the original draft, we identified a couple of metrics as being irrelevant. These have been dropped. We seem to have skipped ahead there. We also identified 3 metrics in the original as what we believed as being unworkable, as they required SMEs to indicate their compliance with high-level international instruments such as the OECD guidelines for multinational businesses and the UN Declaration of Fundamental Human Rights. These have now been replaced by metrics C6 and C7, and these require SMEs to provide a yes/no response, indicating whether they have the policies indicated in C6 and incidents indicated in C7 for the areas covered. And you'll notice those are marked 1 to 6 on the right-hand side of the slide. I think we all have our opinions about yes/no checklists, but I think this is a much more workable approach than the original draft, assuming, of course, that business partners will accept these binary statements. You've already had a preview for the additional financial institutions module. The question mark is because this is a bit of a Schrodinger's cat module for the VSME. It may be alive or dead depending on when you're looking at it. But being serious, its development demonstrates common sense from EFRAG, because they were under pressure by the banking associations to add more metrics. And these did appear at one point during the development, but now they're actually holding this as a placeholder, whilst the EU's platform for sustainable finance finishes its work on a voluntary simplified EU SME taxonomy. And once this is done, we understand that this module will then be populated with the key metrics. So the role of the SME accountant. I think it's obvious that a role for the accountants to help their SMEs is with the stages indicated here for 1 to 6 leading up to reporting, identifying the key ESG risks that the business faces, the key informational driver for the metrics, determining what information is already available and what tools and estimation methods are available to obtain any missing information. Accountants can, of course, help with setting up systems to gather the data, with calculating metrics, and of course, preparing the report. However, I really increasingly see the profession as an essential element in helping SMEs actually move to a sustainable business model. And it's something we've dealt with in our past publications as well. Just think about a distribution company that is considering greening its fleet by moving to electric vehicles. Accountants can help identify any available tax incentives, any special, maybe sustainable finance that might exist for these assets. We can help with the decision-making process on the basis of asset cost, expected useful life, running cost and residual values, all stuff we know very well. But we can also help with the business model. Currently, electric vehicles require more time charging than internal combustion engines need for refueling, which represents a loss of chargeable time. So does the client's pricing model need to change? Are the SMEs clients within the operational distance of electric vehicles, or perhaps another hub is required? If this hub is required, is this the sort of thing that could be shared with other businesses, for instance? If the business has to install charging equipment, is there a commercial possibility to make these charging stations available to other electric vehicle owners? So a business opportunity and other business opportunities. If you have potential customers that do require their value chain to reduce emissions, then this is obviously a good step forward for this business. But there may also be zones in the country where internal combustion vehicles are not permitted or are heavily taxed. So this is another business advantage. So I think these are all sorts of considerations that accountants can help with. And we're not just talking about the climate related disclosures here, but also with many of the other ones as well. So I'll briefly finish with what's next. As mentioned, EFRAG's journey is hopefully coming towards an end anyway, with the final standard being handed over to the Commission. But they are not looking at this at the end for the VSME. They have plans in their documentation to actively engage with SME sustainability ecosystem, and have made references to the availability of online and other digital tools. As we requested in our consultation response, they are actually looking to make available an XBRL taxonomy for the VSME, and also, as we requested, to develop an additional SME illustrative guidance with model actions and policies for those SMEs that do not have the resources to employ an external consultant, but still wish to enter into this arena or are forced to by their value chain. Of course, on publication, all of our work really starts. Well, not all of our work, because many organisations have already been putting considerable effort into building tools to help SMEs with the transition in advance of the VSME, including the 3 organisations that I'm very pleased to welcome this morning. First, I would like to hand over to Marta Ari of Alia to present an overview of Alia's sustainability reporting software, which is specifically directed at SMEs. Over to you, Marta.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for a great overview and status check on your side. Let me share my screen here. And now I won't be able to see you anymore, but I hope you can see my screen in presentation view. Is that correct?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yes. So hello from my side as well. My name is Marta Ari. I'm one of the co-founders of Aila, and Aila is a Finnish company helping micro enterprises and SMEs to kind of a simple and reliable way to provide their sustainability reports. And as many of us know, SMEs are already now facing a lot of data requirements, both from the B2B customers who fall under the CSRD, and then from the financial institutions, so banks and investors who fall under the sustainable finance frameworks. And what we have noticed is that when SMEs first face this kind of a data requirement, they often turn to the accountant. And I fully agree what Paul just said about the SME accountant role now in the sustainability reporting, because we have seen that SMEs are asking their accountants a lot of questions so that they could fill in the kind of the bare minimum requirement when it comes to sustainability reporting. And that's why we have chosen accounting firms as one of our main target groups. We have currently partnered with basically all of the largest Finnish accounting companies and have partnership with all of them. So Aila is kind of a white label for those accounting companies. And sustainability reporting aligns closely with financial reporting, and accountants have previously done a lot of governance help and checked the financial statements, so that can be quite easily shifted to the sustainability reporting. And many of our big accounting firms like that we train their accountants and payroll professionals so that they can independently run through the reports with their SME clients. And most of these accounting firms are under the CSRD, so that's also a good thing for them to kind of expand their sustainability handprint to get as many SME clients on the sustainability track as possible. And what we have seen in Finland as well is that accounting firms feel it very difficult to differentiate themselves with the competitors. So being able to expand the service offering is also crucial for the Finnish accounting companies. And at least in the Nordics, the large stock-listed companies who are now this year under the CSRD, they are really pushing the value chain members, and SMEs are struggling with the data requirements, and so are the accountants. So that's why at least we have felt it very deeply, and we have now many Finnish accounting firms as our customers, and are helping hundreds and hundreds of their SME clients with the VSME reporting. And few examples of our tool. So as we know now, the VSME structure changed a bit, and the basic module got increased. We have seen that the basic module, which is the bare minimum, is still pretty hard for the SMEs, and they are struggling with the data collection. And most of the companies, they have done scope 2 and scope 3, scope 1 and scope 2 calculations already, but the other environmental aspects are still not there. So we have been helping SMEs and the accountants a lot to find that information. We don't have any APIs yet. We are a bit kind of seeing how the system starts working, and how hard it is to manually gather the data. Although we have seen that now this is the first year that the SMEs are gathering the data, and they are starting their sustainability journey, it is good to educate them as well that what does this data mean and where you can find it. And then in the future, for example, the environmental data disclosures, they can be directly get from the financial accounts. But few examples. Maybe our biggest asset is the clarity and really the easiness to use. So we have done a lot of work with the large companies also this year with CSRD reports, and the disclosure requirements are not clear for large companies, so they are definitely not clear for the SMEs or the accountants. So we have really opened up every question and opened up every disclosure requirements, and we are guiding the SME and the accountant through the process and giving examples that what kind of topics and what kind of things could be listed here as an answer. And the first example is from the company background questions. This is quite clear how many places of activity does the company have. But here, just to clarify, if you have an consolidated basis reporting that you are preparing, then you should answer all the company facilities and places of activity that you have. And then the energy consumption and the water consumption questions, for example, are then being asked location-based. Then one example of biodiversity, SMEs are not being asked to clearly describe their biodiversity impact. Even the companies who are under the CSRD, they don't have the exact metrics to measure their biodiversity. So just with SMEs, they can check whether their places of activity are close to Natura 200 biodiversity key areas or the UNESCO heritage places. And if no, then there is no need to worry about these biodiversity questions. Then I wanted to take this own workforce question as an example, because this is something that even the large companies find very hard to answer. So what are the general operating principles concerning your personnel? And this is a narrative question in the ESRS. So company should just write all their answers, but we have generated multiple formats questions, multiple choice questions, so that SMEs get the idea that what they should answer to these questions. And here in the Nordics, we have seen that especially the social sustainability topics are usually in place in small and medium-sized companies, but they don't know how to answer and they don't know how to describe that. So lowering that and giving them the multiple choice formats to make it easier for them to report. And just an example of another question. So do your employees work in several country locations? They can just answer yes or no. And if they answer yes, they can always add more narrative text to there. This is very, very shortly about our tool. I will stop sharing so I can see you, but really making it as easy to understand for SMEs as possible, because we have seen that is the biggest pain point that they have at the moment, and that is something that we have received a great feedback from the accountant side and then from SME side. And then the end product is a CSV report that they can share with their investors or with their B2B customer.
Thank you very much, Marta. And as I mentioned, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of all the sessions.
Yep.
So I would now like to introduce Elena Zayakova and Henrik Mixi, who will provide an overview of Earth, which is Sage's carbon accounting software. Over to you, Henrik and Elena.
Thank you, Paul. I will share our presentation. And thank you, Marta. Very, very interesting. Let me know when you can see this. Brilliant.
Yes,
okay, I'll just put on full screen and then I will lose you all. I won't be able to see you, but okay. Hi, everyone. Really lovely to be here today. We obviously represent Sage. So Sage is one of these big businesses Marta was talking about that falls into the scope of CSRD. But our clients, our customers are mainly small and medium businesses, and Henrik and I are here today to talk to you briefly about our own approach to CSRD. So some of the challenges that Marta was referring to, I'll briefly outline this, and then I'll hand over to Henrik to talk about Sage Earth, which is a carbon accounting tool we have. So I think if we take a step back, and this will link very much to Paul's introduction as well, I think it's very important to always take a step back and think about what are all these regulations trying to do? What is the bigger picture here? Because there is CSRD, but we as a large business obviously are faced with a lot more than CSRD. And we always ask ourselves the question of, okay, if it is not just about reporting, if it isn't just about ticking the boxes of the regulation and compliance, what can we learn? What is beyond that work? We all know there is a lot of effort that goes into reporting and compliance, so there must be a bigger picture beyond that. And in our view, there probably three critical elements that always need to be considered in terms of the regulatory environment. One is resetting that value creation agenda. What does value creation looks like? Paul talked about the role of accountants in helping SMEs creating sustainable business models. What is beyond creating financial value. So there is definitely that element, and it comes across all of the regulatory pieces we have. Is how do we make sure that apart from financial value creation, we also start to kind of map and understand what that non-financial value creation looks like. And that leads to the second point, which is about bringing financial and non-financial data closer together. So financial reporting, you would know this better than me, has been around for many years. There are established standards, there is credibility of the data, there is the proper assurance standards on the data, and people can trust it. Non-financial data isn't there yet, and we all know this, but the purpose really of these regulations is in the large scale to really start bringing these two sets of data together. And then finally, as a result of all of this, to obviously drive transparent disclosure. I think it's in a way it's great that we finally have regulations in place, because for 20 years sustainability reporting has been voluntary, largely voluntary in countries, which has led to the creation of a lot of data, but very inconsistent data, and companies were very much left to kind of their own way of deciding on what and how to report. If they're using GRI or SASB standards, these are voluntary standards that did not kind of prescribe requirements for companies. At Sage, we, as I mentioned, we are caught by the CSRD directive. So we are a UK-listed business, but we have large operations in Europe across France, Germany, and Spain. So we're caught under the directive. And kind of some of the key things that we're currently working on. So completing our double materiality assessment, mapping and understanding our value chain and our partners across the value chain, and what this impacts, positive, negative impacts look like. So really that kind of list of activities that we are currently kind of undergoing helps us to gain quite a lot of insight in terms of what does effective data collection look like, what does engagement with your assurance partner looks like, how do you bring in different functions within the organization to work together, because this isn't just about sustainability data. If anything, this is very much about connecting the different pieces of an organization that they're coming together. So through this insight, we are also able, when we are faced with questions from our customers, which in large are small and medium businesses, to kind of help navigate what's happening at the moment, because quite frankly, there is so much in the media. If you actually go and Google CSRD, you're going to find so many contradictory statements and articles. People can get lost very easily. So we're trying to cut through that complexity, figure it out for ourselves, but then ultimately help, if we can, our customers as well. And then if you wonder, we sometimes have the question, we've discussed this with Paul as well, it's like, where do you start there? Just if you have never ever reported on sustainability topics, I read somewhere the other day, over 350 different ESG topics. How do you, and now we don't have materiality anymore within the VSME. So what is actually relevant to the business? In a large part, really, it comes down to some of the basic metrics that most of the different questionnaires from financial institutions, most of the kind of questions within reporting standards will really kind of cover, and comes down to bigger part on the E's around the emissions, so carbon emissions, and the social aspect is very much about your workforce. So we saw on the screen kind of the own workforce standard, which I completely agree, it's never straightforward. But if you start thinking about what exists within the business already, where this information could potentially exist, you're never really starting from scratch. I think it's very important to utilize and kind of revisit what information is being collected already. And then finally on the G, we obviously a large business, but I think in any business, if you start managing this information, this data, you really need to think about where this accountability sits. Who is responsible for this? Is this that it's ultimately the CEO? Is this HR function? Is it somebody that's being hired for a part-time new role? Whatever it is, somewhere this accountability needs to be visible and sit within within dedicated resource. So I'll hand over to Henrik here in the interest of time, specifically to talk, if we take the first kind of element. So we have started asking our suppliers for carbon emissions reporting on an annual basis, and I'll hand over to Henrik now to talk about specifically Sage Earth.
Thank you very much. So about 2 years ago, Sage started developing a product which is specifically for this. So looking at specifically the carbon emissions related to sustainability reporting. So as you'll see, as you'll all be aware of, there are several frameworks that require carbon data within them. And our platform is focusing on that specific element, not necessarily the S and the G for now, but more specifically carbon data. So you'll see a few lists there. And I think Marta touched on it a little bit in terms of there's a link from the different frameworks in terms of demand. We've also got an insight into the type of value chain and finance market demand that is requiring sustainability data from SMEs. In particular, we've looked at an OECD report recently, which found that over 80% of lenders complain that they can't comfortably provide sustainable financing because there's a lack of sustainability data from SMEs. In addition, we also know that about over 75% of finance institutions assess climate-related impacts of their investment decisions. So they need to know the sustainability, have information on the sustainability data from those they want to lend money to. From a more UK-specific one, there was a recent UK net zero business census that came out, which stated that 37% of SMEs received requests for carbon emissions data. So there's a lot of demand there for it, and we know that from our own Sage's own research in a report that is being launched at COP in the next week or so, that digital tools are a massive enabler to help with this, and companies that have appropriate digital tools are 5.1 times more likely to actually report on sustainability matters. So it's quite convenient then that we have a product called Sage Earth, which does exactly that. It's a digital tool, which is an automated cloud-based accounting system. It syncs all your business accounting software. It syncs with your business accounting software and matches transactions with what's called emissions factors to automatically create a carbon footprint. The product itself is externally verified to be aligned with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the recognized standards for measuring carbon emissions, and it's available for non-Sage customers as well. As you can see, currently 0 free agent in QuickBooks. Accountants are a massive customer base of ours because we see accountants as having a very big role in supporting SMBs to decarbonize. It's currently available to UK customers only, but it is expanding into Australia in Q2 2025, and we also have plans for the rest of Europe. More specifically, it provides a dashboard once it's synced with your accounts, and here you can see a nice overview of things like your total carbon footprint, your carbon intensity metric, and as well as a breakdown of the emissions associated with the scopes, as well as on your right-hand side there, the top emitting activities. And if you click on the top emitting activities, you get a more detailed view on what these are, and that allows you to focus a bit better on where you should be starting your decarbonization planning. You'll see that some of those have hyperlinks that say reduce your impact, and that takes you to a little bit more information about how you can try to reduce your impact. And this is something that we're building out and expanding a lot more on, and you'll be delighted to hear Lydia's presentation afterwards, because SME Climate Hub does exactly that as well, which we have a good relationship with it as well, to develop this.
I think, Henrik, sorry, just very quickly, I think this links really nicely to Paul's intro on kind of going beyond reporting. So what is the insight that we are getting, how we can improve business, how we can have a more sustainable business, what does the business model look like? So I think this sort of insights helps you to start thinking in this direction.
Exactly. Yeah, I was actually thinking that when Paul was going through that, how it links so nicely to the different triggers that can change that. And just very quickly to say that we have a version 1 out just now, but this is an evolving market, and just like it's an evolving market, so are we, and we are launching a new version 2 also in Q2 2025, and here are some of the improvements that you'll be able to see in that. I have a specific mention there about a direct link with PPN 0621, which is a very UK specific public procurement notice, but I've included that just to illustrate that with version 2 and going forward, we are starting to link with other frameworks directly, so that you can have you can produce a carbon footprint, and through the process you will be prompted and told whether or not you are being compliant with X or Y framework that you are wanting to report to. So that's all in the plan. And then we also have carbon reduction advice, which will be bespoke to companies. But just quickly wrapping up, I realize I'm running out of time here, but we just wanted to link back to what Elena was saying about the S and the G. And Sage has a wealth of data through all our products. We are a software company, and we've started working on how we can use that data to provide more ESG insights. It's work in progress, but using anonymized data, we can start producing things like carbon insights of all our customers using certain products. And this example here shows that we can look at spend and transactions within our customer base and calculate carbon emissions to give an overview of emission trends in, for example, spend, as well as industries, regions, and the type. But in addition to that, we're also using the data we have from other products to look at things that focus more on the S and the G, like salaries, number of employees, gender, and also pay gaps. And all of this information helps with the reporting. And this is in this screen, you can see that we are starting to take information on salary sacrifices to see who is providing electric vehicle salary sacrifice schemes and who isn't, but also looking at where the opportunities are for for having a bigger rollout of that type of salary sacrifice scheme to help the company decarbonize in its, for example, commuting elements, but also linking back to Paul's introduction with the business transport as well. So there's a lot of data out there, and we're starting to gather it and make sense of it all so that it can provide more useful information to the companies. And that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but thank you. And if there's any questions, please put them in the chat, because I realize we've kind of gone over time here. So I'll hand over to the next Lydia, the next person.
Well, thanks very much, Henrik and Elena. Last but not least, we of course have Lydia Elliott of SME Climate Hub, who will present an overview of their resources, which will help SMEs make a sustainable transition and of course report on the progress. So over to you, Lydia.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Let me share my screen and make sure that's all working. So, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. Amazing. All right. So I'm really here to talk to you about the SME Climate Hub. And as kind of referenced, the clues in the name, really focusing on the one part of the ESG and one part of the E, so really focusing on the climate. And the SME Climate Hub is kind of intended to be a bit of a one-stop shop for SMEs approaching climate. It's a place to kind of commit, set a target, to learn, to take action, and to report. And really, we see it as kind of also a free entry point for SMEs into some of this this kind of slightly complicated world of climate and emissions reporting and measurement. And it's and also a place to kind of have some global resources that articulate best practice for SMEs. It's an initiative of Where I Work, hosted by Where I Work, which is the We Mean Business Coalition, and we also are in partnership with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative and the UN Race to Zero campaign, which links into our commitment. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is why we think SMEs are good to deal with as a group. We see when we survey the SMEs within our community, so we have about 8,500 SMEs who've made the commitment now. And when we survey them, we find some really common shared barriers. So for example, about 50% say they don't have enough funding to take the climate actions they want to. About 40% say they are struggling with or lack data. So I really agree with the kind of findings that we've talked about all the way through this, that kind of that getting to that data is a really key step. And about 30% say they lack time or knowledge. And we also see that on the other side. So if you have some of the big corporates requesting SMEs to start to take these actions, to start to measure their emissions, report their emissions, one of the key things they tell me is that their request often gets lost because there's no one at that SME who is actually responsible for this as their job. They don't have a sustainability person. So when they send this request into the SME, there isn't somebody to send it to. So there's almost sometimes a governance gap at that SME to take some of these actions, both climate and sustainability. So what the hub looks like in its kind of basics is we have lots of resources to help SMEs take action, which I'll kind of deep dive into and explain. We have our commitment, which is a commitment that's aligned to the Race to Zero campaign. It's to commit to net zero by 2050 or earlier, halve your emissions by 2030, and report on progress. And when SMEs sign up to that, they sign up to the Race to Zero campaign. So it's quite a credible commitment. And we also talk to our SMEs a lot about why they would make this commitment, why they would take this action, because I think there's something about how this is sold to SMEs. Sometimes it comes down as a request, but it also needs to be something that they see value in. Otherwise, they may not actually make progress in the way we want them to. And from our community, about 60% say they see enhanced business reputation coming out of these actions. And about half say they feel like it differentiates them from their competitors. So if they're going out for tenders, they're talking to customers, they feel like if they've got a credible commitment, if they're taking the right climate actions, if they're reporting in the right way, then they are somehow differentiated from their competitors within kind of tenders and procurement processes, or within, just their general customer base. And then the final piece that we have is a place to report on progress, which again, I'll kind of do a bit of a deeper dive into. So our action tools, we just launched 3 weeks ago, our action space, which is basically a tailored space for SMEs, and it's not in any way guardrailed. So it's for any SME who wants to come to the hub, who wants to learn a bit about this. It brings together SME appropriate tools. And when I started off on this journey, there weren't many SME tailored tools out there. So what we've done over the past 3 years is try to create some really tailored tools for SMEs. And then through this, we're also bringing in partners tools. So trying to bring in kind of like best practice tools from all sorts of different all sorts of different partners who've been working on specific topic areas or have already created something into one place so an SME can really easily find it. It's built with 3 core topic areas. So business basics, which is all around kind of what we've been talking about a little bit. So measurement, target setting, reporting, then getting into some of the more action kind of oriented pieces, operational emissions. So all around their scope 1 and 2 emissions, what can they do to bring that down? And then going into supply chain emissions, how can they start engaging with their own suppliers? How can they understand their supply chain emissions? What actions could they be taking? And then we also build it out into 10 kind of deep dive topic, more than 10 deep dive topic areas. And that could be anything from governance to circular economy and design. So it kind of is more a place for an SME who's already started working on this and wants to actually get a bit deeper into something like, how do I actually decarbonize my buildings that my kind of warehouses and offices are in? And then just to give you an example of what a page in it looks like. So this is the business basics page, and it basically pulls together 9 tools and tries to take SMEs through a journey. So we find that they can get very overwhelmed by having all the information all at once. So we try to create levels of things that they should be doing that they can place themselves in. So first, building an understanding, that could be beginning to measure, beginning to understand the basics of climate change, beginning to kind of think about your strategy in a light touch way. Then establishing goals, that's about strategy, governance, making a credible commitment. And then the next section, which you can't see here, is moving on to really how do you finance this and how do you report against this? So it's trying to like take them through the journey that they might go through of kind of understanding what this means for them in terms of measurement, actually setting some sort of commitment or goal, and then beginning to report and search for financing where they need it to take some of the larger actions. And as part of this, we have lots of different tools. So we have a calculator or calculators. We just announced this morning that we're refreshing our calculators for next year. So we're going to have hopefully 3 calculators sitting on the hub, which is going to be really exciting. And these are aimed at being, for me, a free entry point for SMEs. So they're not going to be as amazing as what Sage showed, but they are like a good free entry point for SMEs who don't necessarily have lots of funds as they start off on this journey and want to get started. And we also have hopefully kind of creating one that's aimed at that smaller segment of SMEs as well. So the kind of 1 to 50 employees that have one site, to really help handhold them through this process, because they do get tripped up very easily on the measurement stage. And then we have other things like action guide, 2 pages on a particular topic. So like on target setting or on how to reduce your office emissions or how to start thinking about renewable electricity. And then we have courses, which are, one of them is kind of 7 courses that group under Climate Fit, which was created by Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership and BSR. And that's really aiming to get an SME from not knowing anything about a topic to knowing the basics of a topic in half an hour. So this one is on climate strategy and governance. So how can they go from not really knowing much, take a free course and begin to understand, some of the jargon and the words being used, understand what it means for their business, see examples of other SMEs who've done this, and how they've made that kind of business model transformation work for them. So that's just a little bit about actions, our action space. And then the other place I wanted to deep dive, because I think it's very relevant, is the reporting tool. So for our reporting tool, maybe it's a little bit of an impossible mission, but we've been trying to create a globally relevant tool. We update it yearly based on moves in the ecosystem. For example, VSME, also looking at things like what CDP is doing in their reporting. So we kind of refresh it every year, trying to create what we see as a global, a global summary of what are the important metrics for an SME to report. We've also got some kind of key philosophies that sit behind it. So one is that it's really flexible. And by that, I mean SMEs can report in 3 ways. They can upload a PDF of another report that they've done, so their own internal report, or a report that they've done through a different system, a different standard, and add in a few data points and we'll accept that. They can also use our tool, and our tool split into 2 kind of varieties. One aimed at the smaller size of SME, so 1 to 10 employees, and one aimed at an SME who's kind of more in that big bucket of 11 to 500 employees, which I realize the top definition of the SME is changeable by country, which makes it very interesting. But we try to make a version for those micro SMEs, because we found that when a business has 4 employees, they look at this very differently to a business with 150 employees. We've also built it to have mandatory and non-mandatory questions. So mandatory are things that you would expect, like target setting, scope 1 and 2, and how they're progressing against them. Non-mandatory are things like scope 3, risk management and governance, because often it's not the first thing that an SME starts with, and it can be a little overwhelming at the beginning of their journey. So it's something that we kind of see our more mature SMEs starting to pick up and report against. And also a section that's more around whether they're a climate solution provider or not, because a lot of our SMEs are quite green and they want to showcase what they're doing and their business model transformations. And this reporting tool, all the reports submitted through it are public, and they kind of sit on a place of our website so that they can all be accessed. And I'm so interested to see how all this different tagging for the data progresses, because I really think that's something that we will be and should be aligning with in future. So that's that kind of reporting tool piece. And the final thing I wanted to highlight was we have a series of resources that are aimed at a kind of non-SME audience, that are really aimed at trying to answer some of the questions that people sometimes have. So first, we have an area that's talking about how you can like mobilize your SMEs through the hub, and that has some really useful things like deep dives on the SME climate commitment, deep dives on the SME climate hub reporting that I was talking about, and it just takes you through some of the most common questions that we get asked, and then also kind of step-by-step process of how an SME would come at it and complete it. They can be very useful. We have corporates who use them, banks who use them. They can be quite a useful resource to people trying to direct SMEs towards the hub. And we also have something that I've taken a screenshot of, but we have an RSMEs page. And that is where we publish every single SME who has taken the commitment or has reported. And we have them all listed out, filterable, with lots of different pieces of information: their name, website, country, sector, number of employees, what their commitment is, when they made it, what the status is of their reporting, have they reported or not, and then linking through to their report. It's very similar to the SBTI's companies taking action downloads, if you're familiar with that. And it just is a place where you can go and find information about what an SME has done publicly associated with the hub and download all of that. And corporates sometimes use it to map to their value chains to start understanding if their programs to help their SMEs take action have been successful, and how their SMEs are kind of progressing. So yeah, so that was maybe a whistle-stop tour of the SME Climate Hub. We've got 8,500 committed SMEs from over 140 countries, and we also have a huge number on top of that who are not committed, but also are using our tools and are kind of engaging with those courses, action guides, and on all the different things we do for our SME community. That was my whistle-stop tour of the SME Climate Hub.
Thank you very much, Lydia, and indeed thank you to all the presenters for, I think what everyone will agree, were very informative and useful presentations. I would throw, I don't see anything in the chat yet, so if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, please raise their hand. Just to kick things off, I think, many years ago I was a partner in a small firm sat in Manchester. I would have been looking at this development thinking, oh, yeah, this looks like a lot of work, a lot of training, a lot of investment. Do I really know that there's a market out there for me? So I just wonder if I could ask all four of you, are you seeing this being, in your practice, you're closer to it than I am. Are you actually seeing more SMEs being faced with this, more accountants being asked about this? And just to see your practical experience on this. I hear it.
Maybe I can start. What we have been seeing this year, 56% of Finnish stock-listed companies changed their subcontractors and value chain members due to the lack of sustainability data. And we have seen this, like maybe it's the Nordics, so that things are moving because SMEs are really aware of sustainability topics, and all the accounting firms are coming to us and asking how they could integrate sustainability reporting into their kind of services provided. So I think that this is definitely something that is increasing a lot. Keeping in mind that this is the first year CSRD reporting has started. So I think this will increase yearly.
Thank you. Henrik, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. No, I just wanted to follow up and say yes. I think definitely it'll increase as these reporting frameworks are coming in, because so far to date within Sage Earth, the main demand that we've seen is through pioneers. So small businesses or accountants who are really on the ball. They just have an environmental ethos. They want to do good because that's what they want to do, not because they're being pressurized to. And there's a clear distinction there, because they want to engage and they want to improve, and they're very helpful for doing research, but it's not the mass movement. So it doesn't create the momentum we need to decarbonize. But we are seeing more interest. However, that interest is also slightly limited and directly correlated with, as Lydia mentioned, free tools. As soon as you have to pay, the interest and the desire to engage drops rather dramatically. So we're, with our version 2, for example, we are trying to look at other options of how we can make it more freely available. And I believe one of the options we are developing is we're creating Sage suites. So like Office 365 type thing, but for Sage products, whereby if you are a Sage customer, you will automatically get Sage Earth for free. There will be a charge if you're not a Sage customer, but it's still available. And how that will change over time, I don't know. But as an initial point, that is kind of our way of trying to break that barrier a little bit. But yeah, no, there are still a lot of barriers that are put up, but it is going in the right way.
Yeah, and that really chimes with what we see on the hub. There's a question we ask our community every year that's a really useful question, and I'm very interested to see. We'll run the survey again next year, so we'll see if it moves as these kind of legislative pieces comes in. But it's basically, have any of your stakeholders asked you to reduce emissions? And this is noting that this is a climate. These are NGO, these are SMEs acting on climate, so they are like pretty leading SMEs in this space. And so 63% of them say that they haven't had any stakeholders ask them to reduce emissions. And of those, the biggest bucket is being asked by corporate customers, but that's still only 17% have been asked by a corporate customer to reduce emissions. And I do see that from both sides of my work, that, for the SMEs, they're not getting asked that much by their corporate customers to reduce emissions. And the corporates, they have a little bit of a fear of going out to their SMEs and including it in their climate work. So they're really focused on that top 80% of emissions, the ones that they're really pushing on, which is great. But even a gentle message from them consistently across all the different kind of corporates might make a real difference to beginning to get SMEs started, because they're going to need some time to get good at this. They're going to need time to learn, time to improve. It's not something that's going to happen quickly. So I think that is something that I really want the kind of corporate supply chain ecosystem to start thinking about.
Excellent. Johan.
Hi, you can hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, good. So just a quick, maybe a bit of a stupid question almost. So obviously a lot of this is still a moving target. So, on CSRD, the new mantra of the new commission is that, maybe we should simplify things a bit or, tinker with the reporting standards. On the due diligence directive as well, we're expecting a lot of European Commission guidance on things like supply chain risk assessment and things like that. And obviously a lot of this, what the final shape of these things will be will affect the sort of questions and requests that large companies will ask from SMEs. So long story short, with your tools, you're keeping an eye, I presume, on these developments, and are your tools of the nature that you can very easily, quickly adapt, add to them, new content as the Commission's, for example, due diligence guidance comes in. Is this the case? Just to get the confirmation.
At least kind of from Isla's perspective, definitely yes. And what we did with the new VSME structure, we very quickly changed the 3-module format now to the 2, and now we are waiting for the simplified taxonomy part to add that as a third again.
And from a Sage Earth perspective, same. I mean, we're, I suppose, more fortunate than Isla in the sense that we're specifically for carbon, so it's only one element of a much broader subject matter. So it's a bit, I suppose, it's a bit easier for us to adjust, and the level of adjustment will be less than Isla have to contend with. But yes, no, we try to react quickly, and we try to forecast what's coming in as well.
And I can. Maybe,
and
then do you want to go in, and then I can
jump
say?
in very quickly. Yes, thank you, Lydia. Just very quickly on the variety of tools in the market, and the kind of the ability to make you compliant, if you wish, with all of these regulations. We have seen probably just over 300 different tools at the moment. There may be more than this, and I think for us, we're obviously looking from a large corporate perspective, but I think it's probably applicable for anyone who needs to report, to kind of be very mindful of how some of the tools are being marketed, and how they're positioned, because you can easily see few tools out there that claim are able to make you compliant with regulation. However, they only focus on a particular element. So with Sage Earth, we're very mindful to be very clear with people. The carbon accounting side is what we're really great at. We are not going to make you compliant on CSRD. However, we can help with finding other data points that exist within the organization with regards to the social aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Lydia, if you'd like to step in, and Jane has her hand up as well.
Yeah, so I'd just say that from kind of our perspective, yes, for our kind of action tools, we always refresh those. We refresh them usually every year. So we kind of like update them based on best practices for the whole year. From the reporting side is maybe, although climate focus, a little tricky because we also are looking globally. So that sometimes adds a layer of complexity. It's not just, oh, let's respond to what's happening in the EU or the UK or in California, but kind of trying to take a view of what is becoming a global norm in terms of reporting. So that we look at once a year as we refresh our tool, and then we keep the tool open and close it and then update it. So it's maybe a little slower, but there's a lot of things happening for SMEs at the moment in a lot of different places. So I feel like every year it's a very interesting process.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah, just to iterate what was just said, but one thing, Johan, you should be aware of is we only talk about the VSME, and that is nice because that is a limited set of metrics. It's a limited set of reporting that you have to do. The moment at least the draft we have seen for the LSME, holy moly, that's a different animal altogether. And if the European Commission is really looking for lifting the burden, they could do all the SMEs, listed or not, a great favor if they made the VSME apply to all and just make it mandatory for the listed ones. That is the easy peasy way, because then we also prevent fragmentation towards, for instance, the banks.
Yep. Yes, I was a coward, so I haven't really addressed the LSME today. Plus the fact we need a lot longer than an hour to do that anyway. Muriel.
Thank you, Paul. One general comment, and it's about the practicalities and the transition period, either for SME or for bigger, let's say, entities. I believe that we should have started by sector industry risk-based approach. This is quite a funny thing in our profession. We are very used to make an audit risk approach focused on risk. And here, when you look, of course, at the CSRD and SME, the prism is not a risk approach by sector in a certain way. So it's a personal comment. I think, and especially in connection with Draghi report, the difficulties that maybe happen on the next steps for implementing all that. Even though we know the direction, and this is granted and it's unquestionable, from a practical transition and buy-in, we should have started by sector risk-based approach. Thank you. Just a comment.
Absolutely, and I would totally agree with that. In fact, the position in our office, at least, is we should have started with the CS3D rather than the CSRD. But we are where we are. I'll wrap it up soon, but I just want to throw a question in to all our speakers and anyone else that has a view as well, and maybe particularly at Sage, a bit cheekily. We're talking about the VSME here like it's the second Bible or something. Fundamentally, it will be just paper if it's not used. Do you have any feeling the degree to which supply chain, value chain may accept the VSME disclosures as a suitable analog for their own requirements? And I address this at Sage particularly because you are obviously Set 1 reporters, and your approach to obtaining value chain information from your SME clients, whether this really is going to be a help or not. Anyone want to take the bait on that?
I can start. Maybe Henrik, if you want to jump in. I think I think, to be completely honest with you, Paul, I think with the way it's been simplified at the moment, the chances to take it, yes, would be significantly larger. I think when we were providing feedback as an organization to EFRAG on the standard, in a way, really pleased to see with some of the kind of conclusions you outlined at the beginning of this conversation, because we couldn't really. We struggle to understand how people will follow materiality in the sense of what it was before, and I think at the moment, so we do ask our suppliers, for example, for carbon emissions and CDP reporting. Now, ideally, I think we're in a very interesting kind of time where we live in a time where all these standards are kind of coming together. They won't come together fully and completely, at least in the next 18 months. I don't see how this will happen. So we'll need to go through that phase, but ultimately having one sort of a standard, being the VSME, which for me, at the moment, it provides the basis of what reporting really needs to be. Of course, we can criticize it more and we can add to it more and we can debate it for days and months. But as a starting point, the critical thing here is to start, because we need to start from somewhere. With sustainability reporting, I have been in sustainability reporting for 20 years now, and the debates of what is right and what is wrong are never ending. But to get a company to even start, this is why we had this kind of three buckets at the start of our presentation. That already puts you in the right kind of mindset of what this could look like, what it would mean, what is the effort needed to create this information. Henrik, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, no, I just want to. I think there's two approaches to this, and one is that yes, I think the VSME is going to help with the overall reporting, absolutely, because as Elena says, it's a starting point that provides data. The broader picture in terms of what the purpose of the CSRD, well, from a carbon perspective, carbon emission perspective, the purpose of the CSRD and the CSDDD, etc., is for. I don't think it's useful for that because it's not giving sufficient amount of detail, or it's not encouraging the SME to get sufficient amount of detail on their impacts to be able to do something about it. So having tools like the SME Climate Hub or Sage Earth, the more you automate it, the easier it is for the SME to get that data regardless, just still have it, and then they can act on it. But I don't think in the current limitations within VSME, it's going to facilitate any wider decarbonization within SMEs.
Thank you very much. Unless anyone else has a question or a comment they'd like to make, I will call an end to this session. And once again, thank you for everyone that's attended, and especially to the presenters. I think this, as I mentioned earlier, the work is just beginning. So certainly Accountancy Europe will be continuing this once the final standards are submitted to the Commission, and we'll be looking to see what practical help we can give, and equally, I've no doubt we'll be in touch with our friends of the solutions providers again in future. So thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you. Goodbye.